All over the country today, families are remembering their loved ones lost 30 years ago in the worst mass suicide in history.
909 people died at Jonestown in South America in November 1978. They were ordered to kill themselves and their children by radical cult leader Jim Jones. Also killed that day, 3 journalists, including an NBC reporter whose son is KXLY4 reporter Jeff Humphrey. KXLY's Melissa Luck is here with how Jeff is honoring his dad today.
Yeah, Jeff has spent more than half of his life on TV, essentially talking about other people's lives, but he has never spoken publicly about his father's death. His father was an NBC reporter ambushed and killed at Jonestown. Though while he never talks about his dad, he lives his life to honor him.
My name's Harris, and that's my opinion.
It's not his commentaries that NBC News reporter Don Harris is remembered for. It's the way he died, shot to death while seeking the truth about a radical cult at Jonestown.
The president said they lost their lives pursuing the highest traditions of journalism.
The world lost a newsman that day in 1978 and learned a story about the deaths of 900 people. But a family lost a husband and a father.
Personally and selfishly, I've never really grieved for those 900 people. We had our own thing to grieve, and I never really thought about all those other people that died that day.
KXLY reporter Jeff Humphrey was just 17, his sisters even younger. Their mom Shirley did her best to hold the family together, just as she had when her husband's career turned from local reporter to network correspondent.
I felt like I was doing my part, to enable him to do what he needed to do. So I did it. And I wasn't a working mom, I stayed home.
So she understood when her only son was ready to follow in his father's footsteps.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Humphrey, and this is Daybreak.
And he had enormous shoes to fill.
When you follow in your folks' footsteps, there's a lot of ownership in whatever that trait is, and you want to protect it, and you want to keep it as pure and dignified as you can.
Don Harris liked doing stories about rugged individualists. He was one himself.
Harris had tremendous sources that he always protected. He knew which information to hold on to and which to share with the world. His investigations were considered groundbreaking.
I just had 2 people go through carrying a gun.
He won an award in Texas for a story on airline security, pointing out its ineffectiveness by sending 2 people armed with guns through the search and metal detector system at the Dallas airport in 1972.
Jeff was so impressed with that story, he tried it himself in 1982, though this time with explosives in the Fort Myers airport. But instead of being a national correspondent, Jeff was a college intern.
It was on the weekend. I didn't consult any management. I got my poor photographer fired.
And you were 18?
18. And the FBI said, don't come back to Florida again.
I was sad for him because he was so young and he didn't know the difference, really, that here's this boy who thinks that he's a man and he's trying hard to do something really good because he thought that the security wasn't as good as it should have been at the airport. It probably wasn't.
That setback didn't keep Jeff from following his dad's example.
I think that Jeff grew up at a very early age and was a responsible kid. And he tried to do the things that his father did early. And so I was not surprised that he continued.
So how does he honor his father on this day, the anniversary of his death? The way he does every day, by ensuring Don Harris's principles live on in his only son.
You try to go out on that day and do a good news story. And if you do that, then...
And I talked to Jeff's family about how the deaths of Harris and those 2 other journalists have become sort of lesser-known footnotes to this Jonestown story. That's part of the reason Jeff decided to talk about his family's tragedy now, after all these years. In pursuit of information about the story, I talked to a lot of network producers. A lot of people 30 years later have this deep sense of respect for Don Harris, and I heard a lot of those good stories about Jeff as a young man.
We are so fortunate to have Jeff on our team. I mean, he is truly the epitome of what his father was doing, and he lives it every single day. And what I find fascinating now is Jeff's son, Brad, is following in Jeff's footsteps.
That's right.
He followed in his father.
His son is a student at Western Washington University, and today he's on the radio doing a story about Jonestown. So it's amazing, the tradition and how this just keeps going.
Yeah, and Jeff has heard from so many other people in the community, too, who are emailing and from all over the country.
Yeah, Jeff wrote about this on our blog at KXLY.com.
It's powerful.
You should read it. Jeff, it was hard for Jeff to tell this whole story in his own words. So you should go on there, read that blog, and feel free to pass along your your condolences and your memories to Jeff and his family.
Fabulous story. Thanks for sharing it, Melissa.